Well, good afternoon. My name is Liz McGee, and I have another teaching I'm going to record right now, so I hope this blesses you. I am starting out my title, The Lying Pen of the Scribes. This is a popular phrase that's thrown around today in a couple of circles of scholarship, shall we say. But I wanted to start out by saying I have a name for people who want to use this as a excuse for doing the same thing, throwing out whole parts of the Bible and calling it kind of a pick and choose way of doing theology. But I don't know if you're familiar with this. I bet a lot of people are. But Thomas Jefferson, one of our great founding fathers, had a Bible. He did a Bible. It's called the Jefferson Bible. It was called The Life and Morality of Jesus, I believe is the name of it. He wrote it in 1820. But he cut out, I'm going to show you a picture of this Bible. He just sort of took it upon himself, due to his personal theology, to cut out whole sections of the New Testament and to paste it together in such a way that it was his Bible. And they have copies of it. I'm actually going to show you this real quick. Let's see if I can do this. Where is it here? See this? They call this the Jefferson Bible. And you can see whole sections of it are just cut out. And what he was trying to do was his theology. And so I call this now the group, we're calling these the scissors gang, or because he did it with a razor. He would cut it out and then he would glue the pieces that he wanted to on a piece of paper. The scissors gang or the razor gang. But what he took out of it, so interesting, he took all the miracles out. He took all of the supernatural references or phenomena, and he basically took out the resurrection. He took out the fact that Yeshua, the reference that could have interpreted him as a divine being, as the son of Yahweh, son of God. He got rid of all the allegorical. He didn't want anything to do with any of the more sublime levels of interpretation, what we couched in parables or allegory. He took out, like at the birth of Yeshua, he took out all the angels in the story, the genealogies, the prophecies, the miracles. He was the ultimate rationalist or naturalist. What he ended up with was he ended up with the moral code only. That's it. The morals, I think it was called the morals and life of Jesus. Okay. Everything else he took out, and he ascribed, to false interpretations or lying scribes or bad priests who were trying to put in all this extra story. And it just struck me. I think that is so funny because a lot of these things are back under fire again. We've really had many, many, many generations of in Christianity, and even in with our brother Judah in the Jews, denying all supernatural. We've seen very little real power in the church. People today are denying the resurrection. There's no miracles being seen. We have a rationalist or a very naturalistic gospel today. But I just want to say, in Jefferson's defense, actually, at least he kept in the moral code. Okay, and actually, I would wish that we could I'd almost be good with a Jefferson Bible in every classroom so that we could teach the present generation. There are laws, there are morals, there are ethics, there are standards. But this is happening again today. Many in the Hebrew roots camp, many people are beginning to deny Yeshua. A lot of Gnosticism is coming back into the forefront and being taught as truth. One particular one is that other, quote, Elohims in the Greek says an Elohim, which people are realizing today is a plural Hebrew. Now thinking like, well, there's other gods. The other gods made man, so other Elohims. This is a big eating meat now is murder. It's all of a sudden eating. The injunction that Yah gave to Noah that he could eat meat is now totally under fire. There were no offerings and sacrifices. So that was all made up, and that was a lie. People want to cut that out of their Bible now with scissors. There's no virgin birth. That's another one getting cut out. And again, we've always had the problem of no supernatural or power of God. There's no real baptism of the Holy Spirit, the Ruach, and there's only a water baptism. There's really no spiritual birth. There's no speaking in tongues. There's no gifts, and all this stuff. So, I mean, this has always been a problem. And I want to quote you again, just what Jefferson said about it. He said, what he left with: there will be found remaining the most sublime and benevolent codes of morals which has ever been offered to man. I have performed this operation for my own use by cutting verse by verse out of the printed book and arranging the matter which is evidently his, and which is meaning his, the Father's, and which is as easily distinguishable as diamonds in a dunghill. The result is an octavo of 46 pages of pure and unsophisticated doctrines. Now, I don't know how it's going to go for Jefferson in the resurrection. We'll just have to see. But, it does say not to add or to subtract to the word. So I don't know. We have to rethink this propensity that's growing to just throw stuff out that we don't understand. That's the issue. A humble spirit before the Lord will say, Father, I don't understand. I don't get it. There are things that I have researched for years that I am still not ready to teach on because I just don't really know that I know what's being said in the text. Instead of just throwing it all out and saying, oh, it's so stupid, or why would they do that? Like sacrificing. I mean, I have struggled for years trying to figure out why they were doing it, what they were doing, what was the point, what was behind it. Because, see, I'm not sure there are spiritual realities behind everything. All right. But instead of just throwing it all out, I'm waiting on the Lord. Wait. Sometimes it's precept by precept. So before you sometimes can understand, especially a lot of the deeper, more arcane, you've got to build a huge foundation of information so that you can judge rightly. So in order to stem this tide, there's a lot of danger in this. Not only when you can shipwreck not only your own faith, you can shipwreck people's faith. It undermines the faith of many when people just carte blanche throw out whole sections of the Bible, when their scissor gang gets a hold of it. But let me read a quote here, because this is something that is plaguing both Christianity and Judaism today. But I thought that this was an interesting jumping off point. I want to read this quote. It says, as we address either of these arguments, let us bear in mind the concomitant question of whether a religious person may accept moral values which are not found within Torah or halakha. Halakha means the law, or approve standards which might oppose the Torah standards, or which imply at the very least that the Torah standards are inferior or less humane or less potent or not in existence at all. It is presumptuous, bordering on blasphemy, to call an act sanctioned by the Torah and perhaps mandated by halakha an act of cruelty or inhumanity. We must first of all respond to this challenge in Jewish tradition, for if there is indeed any less, and this is a quote, and I'm going to go right into this, was on the discussion of vegetarianism, because I am going to pick up on that theme a little bit more tonight, because it's getting to the point, it's blasphemy. You're just throwing whole things out that you just don't really understand or have. I would be very scared to do that. I would be much rather saying, okay, it's in the Testament. I might not understand it. I might not like it, but it's there. And endeavor to have Yahweh teach you than to just carte blanche take a self-righteous superior attitude that you know better than Yahweh, or you know better than Torah. What humane standards should be. So it says when the standards of vegetarianism condemn the values of the Torah or denounce its mitzvah as immoral or distasteful, we must categorically reject vegetarian ideology as aberrant philosophy. We believe that the Torah's ways are paths of pleasantness and righteousness. Any belief which seeks to negate the Torah's truths is misguided. I always say, if there's any confusion, it's on our part. Yahweh is not confused. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's always been doing. So if there's any confusion, it really is on our part. So I want to go and I want to talk about these two things, the lying pen of the scribes and these false doctrines, especially this Gnostic one. This is from the Acts of Paul. This is a little quote here because, again, there's so much research and reading and understanding that has to be done to sometimes flush out what is going on in a lot of these passages. Because we weren't there. There's nothing like being an eyewitness. We're not. We have to rely on texts which are heavily corrupted and badly translated. So, but here is one, it says in the Acts of Paul, which is a pretty substantiated 160-ish kind of text, just AD, of some of the more flushed out, more detailed accounts of Paul. And they're coming back, fragments of this are coming back from all over the place, and scholars are working frantically to try to put it together in a holistic whole. But he says here that there were certain men come to Corinth. And we know this because there's New Testament. Paul talks about this in the New Testament, but this is in an apocryphal work called the Acts of Paul. It says, for there were certain men come to Corinth, Simon and Cleopas, saying, there is no resurrection of the flesh, but that's only the spirit only, that the body of man is not the creation of God, of Yahweh, or of the world, and that God did not create the world, and that God knoweth not the world, and that Yeshua was not crucified, but it was an appearance only, that he came as an apparition, and that lie was not born of Mary, that Mary was not the virgin who conceived the seed of David. And there was, in a word, many things which they taught at Corinth, deceiving many, undeceiving themselves. Now, a lot of the things I just talked about, see, there's nothing to understand. They're just recycled. The enemy just loves to just recycle his lies to different generations that he thinks are pretty clueless. But this one is coming back big time because some people on YouTube are really teaching that the Elohim, that the body of man, that man is not the creation of Yahweh, and that he did not create the world, but other quote unquote lesser Elohims did. Now that's a flat out lie. And I could maybe in another, that's a Gnostic heresy. That's a classic Gnostic heresy. But when we get into this, it says that for certain men came to Corinth, Simon and Cleopas. One thing that's needed to understand is Simon, and this I've been trying to say, is Simon Magnus. People should do more research on this. There really is enough information out there to piece this guy together. He was such a black magician. It's really amazing. And he really was had a tremendous power and was doing unbelievable demonstrations of spiritual power. And the Simeonians was a Gnostic heretical sect that followed him. They call him the father of Gnosticism. So in context, you can figure out who a lot of these are Gnostic doctrines. You can figure out who Simon is, Simon Magnus and Cleopas. These people are historically documented. So you have to be really Berean. But I want to go back to this lying pen of the scribes. This is interesting because, this is another one. They'll say, oh, it was just, if they don't like a doctrine, oh, it's just the lying pen of the scribe. Like, okay. So I'm going to read all the verses, or I have about 6 or 7 that talk about this. Isaiah 29:10. For the Lord has poured over you a deep sleep, over you a spirit of deep sleep. He has shut your eyes. He has shut your eyes, the prophets. He has covered your heads, the seers. The entire vision will be to you like the words of a sealed book, which when they give it to the one who is literate, saying, please read this, he will say, I cannot, for it is sealed. In Isaiah 6:9, it says again, go and tell this people, be ever hearing and never understanding, be ever seeing, but never perceiving. In Isaiah 6:10, it says, make the heart of this people callous, make their ears dull and close their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes and hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, turn and be healed. One more. This is in, I believe this is Isaiah 9 again. For this is a rebellious people, false sons who refuse to listen to the instruction of Yahweh, who say to the seers, you must not see visions, and to the prophets, you must not prophesy to us what is right. Speak only pleasant words, prophesy illusions, get out of the way, turn aside from the path, lead us no more, let us hear no more about the Holy One of Israel. Now, one more, go into Isaiah 29:10. My last point is, the Lord has brought over you a deep sleep. He has sealed your eyes, the prophets. He has covered your heads, the seers. Now, in the there's a little bit of a parabolic language in this, in terms of where he says that he has shut the eyes of the prophets and the ears. He has covered the heads of the seers. It was the prophets and the seers who were responsible to be able to hear and to receive prophecy from Yahweh for the people. But they had gotten so calloused and dull, and the people didn't want to hear it. They were murdering all the true prophets, basically. So when he is saying that he has sealed their eyes, and that they can't, the prophecies and the visions that were given all the way from Adam, seriously, all the way through Enoch. If you don't have what's called the keys to the kingdom, if you're not a true anointed prophet of Yahweh, the deeper mysteries, the understandings, they're like sealed. You can't see them. You can't hear them. He literally will block you from it. I mean, he won't give his pearls, don't throw your pearls before swine. And this is what was happening more and more. The prophets and the sages, their spiritual eyes, because always spiritual eyes and spiritual ears, so you can see and you can hear what the Lord is saying and doing, was getting calloused and they couldn't hear. So it got to the point where it would say, how long will this continue in the hearts of these lying prophets? So they still wanted to have a stream of prophecy. They still wanted to act like they knew what was going on there. They would just make stuff up. That's what happens with prophets. When you lose the anointing, you just make stuff up. You just, oh my gosh, it's rampant today. And they prophesied the delusions of their own minds and of their own hearts. All right. It says in Jeremiah, Jeremiah 8:7, it says, but behold, the lying pen of the scribes has made it into a lie. The wise men are put to shame. They are dismayed and caught. Behold, they have rejected the word of the Lord, and what kind of wisdom do they have? See, the point is, prophets and sages are supposed to have wisdom and understanding. I've been through this on all YouTubes. That's not ordinary knowledge. See, they were supposed to be the keepers of the secrets. They were supposed to be the ones who could interpret the prophecy of Yahweh that was coming down, or old prophecies that they had recorded. They had a lot of stuff that was recorded, and they were supposed to be able to read these and to understand the times and the seasons that they were living in and how to direct the people. But as they lost that ability, they just started making stuff up, and they basically started telling the people what they wanted to hear. Peace, peace. Oh, don't worry. Yahweh's never going to get really mad at you. You can just keep sinning and keep down that slippery slope. It's never really going to end bad for you. And this whole thing, and we know how history has, how it's all come down. Both Israel and Judah are really basically still in exile. But we're putting it back together. Praise Yahweh. Now, how can you say we are wise? For we have the law of the Lord, when actually the lying pen of the scribes has handled it falsely. So what this is really, I'm saying, instead of using a scissors Bible, making it and throwing stuff out that you don't understand, what we should be doing is praying to the Lord to give us wisdom and understanding, so that he will, as sages, or if you want to say you want to be a prophet or whatever, have wisdom and have understanding, that he would open our eyes and open our ears so that we could know what is the true word of the Lord. Now, I want to get into another point here that I found. This was a great find, though, because I'm a proponent of the oral Torah, because I believe that Moshe was given the Torah. He was given a written halakha, but he was also given the key, what's called the keys to the kingdom. He was given this deeper wisdom and understanding of how to interpret the keys. And I found in, okay, so this book, where did I have my notes? Hold on, did I just throw it away? For doing this. So in the Damascus document, I found, hold on, what book is this? I believe it is in, okay, this book, the Damascus document, okay, this concept I'm saying, and I also found in a book, this is all out of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I'm reading from the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Berg, and who is that? Wise, Aberg, and Cook. It's a good one to just read. But they had this little fragment they found, which was called the Test of a True Prophet. And in it, it talks about how when they were to test a prophet, because that's again all through the Old Testament, you're supposed to test them. And if it comes to pass, he's a true prophet. If it doesn't, and there was this whole process, but it talks about how the high priest, who was supposed to be the most fully initiated person on the planet, let's put it that way, all right? And I like to use these words. These are perfectly fine words. He was probably the most, he was supposed to be the most educated, the most knowledgeable, the most full of wisdom of the knowledge, all oral Torah and halakha that they had, okay? And if a prophet came on the scene and they would listen to the prophet and they would wonder, he was supposed to go into, before the curtain near the ark of testimony, he was to go there, and it says, there he shall study all the commandments of the Lord, comparing all the laws that have been kept secret from you. Finally, he shall emerge into the presence of all the leaders of the assembly. This then shall be your way of no. Now it's lost. This then, and then ... They don't know. But in the Damascus document, it talks about, let's see, that David, referencing Deuteronomy 17:17, for David had not read the sealed book of the law. So there was a sealed book. This is my point I'm trying to say. There really was a sealed book. There was an oral Torah that in the ark, for it was not opened in Israel from the days of the death of Eleazar and Joshua and the elders who served. It was not opened in Israel from the day of the death of Eleazar and Joshua and the elders. It lay buried and was not revealed until the appearance of Zadok. Nevertheless, the deeds of David were all excellent, except the murder of Uriah, and Yahweh forgave him for that. But the point is that David, there was a sealed book. I wonder why it says, and the elders who served the goddess Ashtaroth. It lay buried and was not revealed until the appearance. So in other words, they lost it, because this is what Yeshua said, they've lost the keys. This is also referenced in all the places. This is what's known as sitting in Moshe's seat, where there is a standard by which you can interpret. All right. And this is what Enoch is saying, that the elect in the last days will get back this knowledge and understanding, and everything will be judged according to the standard, so that the books of righteousness, I had that quote too, so that the books of righteousness can be made known to the elect. And if I can find that one, I'll read that one too. Now, why is it important to take this principle of, okay, are we just going to throw out all this concept? Are we going to let the vegetarians rewrite Torah and say that there was no offerings and sacrifices, and that Yahweh really never wanted us to, that the injunction with Noah is wrong and everybody got it wrong? All right, let's just start with this. Let me say, on the good side, there is a health crisis in this country, and it's spreading throughout the whole world, but there is definitely a health crisis. But it is not one that is going to be solved by just getting rid of meat from your diet, okay, and just eating quote-unquote plants. Okay, that's like making the kingdom of Elohim about meat and drink. That's one of the Gnostic heresies, again, that Paul was coming against. But if you want to, what has the problem is, see, we have come under the curses. It says, if you obey me, there'll be blessings. If you disobey me, there will be curses. It shouldn't be rocket science to people to understand it. We are just floating in curses, in bad outcomes for our children, our health, our finances, our nation, our school systems. I mean, it's, our president, there are things going on. These things are getting monumentally bad. all right? And they have for many generations. So it's because we have been, again, throwing out Torah because we find it archaic, or we don't understand it, or we just frankly we want to be lawless. We just don't want to abide by it, all right? Whatever. But when you stop eating kosher, or when you stop eating the way Yahweh wanted you to eat, and you let your enemy feed you, you are opening the door to every evil work. And this is what we're fighting against. So yeah, people should become more vegetarian today. People should take charge of their diets. They should know what they eat, carefully watch it, and we should speak with our pocketbook, all right? Which is a very powerful way, because it is the Luciferians who have control today over 90% of the food sources that most people consume. Now that's a fact. We are not an agrarian society. We are not like it was in Israel, where everybody had their own plot, it was under their own, vine, and their agriculture society, and they had total control over their foodstuffs. And actually they were a great agricultural trading nation, so that the things that they needed, like wood or metals, they could bring in and trade food for. That's not the case today. So we have to understand we are living in a false food system, and that is a problem, and that is the problem. But it's brought about because we're under the curses, because we have let go of this fundamental law of Torah, that you are to take charge of your own health. This is what eating kosher. You're to know your own foodstuffs. The Essenes, they grew their own food. They knew exactly what they were consuming, where it was coming from. They were tending it. There was no GMO in their food. There was no additives. There were no, preservatives. None of this stuff. Okay, these are things. And we can't get there overnight, but people, you can take charge where you can, and you can get there. But so that's what I want to say. On the good side, it is really true. The reason we have this problem is not because meat is inherently evil. Okay, it is because we have given over our food consumption to be administered to us by people who are basically motivated by greed, by cruelty to the animals. So there is great, because the Torah is all about how you treat animals. And most of us have checked out. We don't even want to really think about the slaughterhouse. Oh gosh, that's a little too real and in your face. Well, you should check it out, because it's anti-Torah in its fundamental. Okay, so all right. Now getting back to the other side is what was the issue? I've been through this. I did another YouTube, but the issue always has been, because in my opinion, this is a serious thing to address, because see, it's getting our eye off of the real issue here. All right. The issue is not eating meat. The issue is eating meat with the blood in it. This is so fundamentally important. And because, again, we don't understand the deeper significance of what is going on, we just want to consider it barbaric, arcane, and, we can't hurt little animals. The animals are just like people. Well, you know what? No, that's not the story 100% according to Torah. But let's just go through the verses really quick that talk about the concept of me. And I'll tell you just another thing. One of the biggest problems is just the King James translation. The King James translates all eating kind of thing as meat. Everything they eat meat. And that kind of exacerbates this argument, all right? When really a lot of the words that should not be translated meat, period, are just eating. We eat all kinds of things. We eat fruits, we eat grains, we eat meat. We're eating. All right. So let's go to Leviticus 3:17. It shall be a perpetual statute throughout your generations in all your dwellings, that you shall eat neither fat nor blood. All right. Now, when you hear this perpetual statute, okay, that's a clue. These are things. Yes, Yahweh does not change. He didn't change. And the fact is, when and then I say this is a slippery slope. Does he change? Doesn't he change? Well, he does change. believe it or not, even though you got a verse that says, oh, I am the Lord, I change not. His eternal Godhead, his immanent essence and nature does not change. But does he give different directives at different times? Have we not had different covenants that have had different stipulations in them? Absolutely. Some conditional and some non-conditional. So you have to kind of, don't do one verse theology and just let a verse rule the whole thing. Critically think. So, but you should, whenever you hear the word just blood, it is not talking about eating a steak or a piece of meat that's been properly prepared. That is flesh. We have to distinguish between the word flesh and the word blood. Either need fat nor blood. Because in Deuteronomy 12:23 it says that the life of the flesh is in the blood. There is a fundamental issue here that is extremely important spiritually. So let's just go into a couple. Leviticus 17. It says, whosoever the house of Israel or the sojourner sojourning among them eateth any manner of blood. Okay, I will set my face against that soul that eateth blood. And you can look at this word. This is the word blood. It is not the word meat, and it is not the word for eating. And will cut him off from among his people. For the soul of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh atonement for the soul of all flesh. It is the blood thereof. Whoever eateth it shall be cut off. See, this is what is fundamentally at stake. Yes, he has instituted sacrifice offerings, and that the blood does make atonement, but it's blood that is specifically prepared, and it is specifically sanctioned and blessed by Yahweh as an offering versus, and I'm going to get into this, the Luciferian satanic practice. Remember, everything that Yahweh institutes is good. He turns around and profanes it. In Deuteronomy 12:23, be sure that thou eat not the blood, for the blood is the soul, and thou shalt not eat the soul with the flesh, with the basar. This is the word, the piece of meat. It says, let's see here. It says in, I have so many of these. Let me get the importance. This is out of 2 Enoch, 2 Enoch 58. It says, whoever defiles the soul of beasts defiles his own souls. But you can't just say, oh, defiles the soul of beasts. What is going on here? It's saying because see, the word isn't going to contradict itself, but it's defiling this. What would defile the soul of a beast? If it was not properly prepared and offered as an atonement for the sin. That's the only condition of this type of offering and sacrifice. For man brings clean animals to make sacrifice for sin. There is an atonement. There was a 1-to-1 ratio that Yahweh instituted. This is why we can't throw Torah out. He's the one who instituted this. For man brings clean animals to make sacrifice for sin, that he may have cure of his soul. And if they bring for sacrifice clean animals and birds, man has cure for his soul. All is given you for food. That's in Genesis 9:3. Binded by the 4 feet, that is to make good and cure. To make good the cure, he cures his soul. For whosoever kills beast without wounds kills his own souls and defies his own flesh. And he who does any beast any injury whatsoever in secret, it is evil practice, and he defiles his own soul. See, the Torah strictly forbids us from eating the flesh with the blood because, as it explained before, it is the animal's energy. And there is a whole dark side ritual. And it's being practiced today. It's being ramped up. And this is what's not being talked about in this whole discussion. It's all about, oh, it's meat. You can't eat meat. No. See, this is what irritates me about Hasatan. He's always trying to move the goalpost, get the discussion over here. No. The point is, we need to understand this Luciferian practice of eating meat sacrificed to idols or meat that has the blood in it is still going on today. It is getting ramped up unbelievably. And this is what we need to address, okay? Now, let me go back to a couple more things here. So I've given you a lot of proofs. And I talked about the Noahide laws. I mean, this has been told to man from the get-go. it says in Jubilee 7:20 through 28, and in the 28th Jubilee of Noah, in Jubilee, Noah began to enjoin upon his sons the ordinances and commandments and the judgments that he knew. These people knew the laws of Yahweh. They weren't just sent out on a ship and landed on a mountain and said, just, hey, have at it, start over. No, he knew. And I'm going to show you from the Genesis Apocryphon how he sacrificed. He had a peace offering, which is an offering that you do consume right there, right out of the ark. But let me go back to this. Ordinance and command and the judgments that he knew, and he exhorted his sons to observe righteousness, to cover the shame of their flesh, to bless their creator, to honor their mother and father, to love their neighbor, to guard their souls from fornication and cleanness and all iniquity. For owing to these things came the flood upon the earth. For whosoever sheddeth man's blood, and whosoever eateth the blood of any flesh shall be destroyed from the earth. It just says it over and over. It's so plain language. All right. The issue is eating meat with the blood in it. All right. And live, sometimes raw, live meat. Now, let me get into some of my last one is from the Zohar. Okay. This, and I'm telling you, Yeshua is all over the Zohar, as I've been saying. But here's a quote. It says, the Messiah calls for all the diseases and pains and sufferings of Israel, bidding them to settle on himself, which they do. As long as Israel was in the Holy Land, by means of the temple service and sacrifices, they averted evil diseases and afflictions from the world. Now it is the Messiah who is the means of averting them from mankind. See, there is an understanding. It is the atonement. See, this is where if you start throwing this stuff out, if you start saying there's no sacrifice in the altar, then there's no atonement of Yeshua. There's no point for him to have to be a sacrificial lamb, parabolically and by his flesh. What's the point? See, so it is a slippery slope, and it is important to stay rooted and grounded in the truth. Now, let me go back to a couple. Where's my one big? All right, because I want to do the other side. But let's keep reading a couple of these, because there were many times that Yahweh was very upset with his people because they were starting to practice just like the pagans. See, eating meat sacrificed to idols, eating meat with blood in it, drinking blood, these are Luciferian pagan practices, okay? And many times throughout the history of Israel, they would get caught up in these things. The whole northern kingdom was basically kicked out, divorced, sent into the nations because they wanted to practice a religion, kind of they made up their own half Jewish, half pagan religion, and they wanted to do those practices. And Yahweh said, no, you can't. That's not me. That's not how you do it. And they wouldn't listen. It was kind of like, okay, fine. You want to worship the Baals? Have at it. So in Hosea 6:6, it says, for I desired mercy and not sacrifice, and the knowledge of Yahweh more than burnt offerings. Hosea 8:11 says, because Ephraim hath made many altars to sin, altars shall be unto him to sin. I have written to him the great things of my law, but they were counted as a strange thing. They sacrificed flesh for the sacrifices of mine. In other words, and that said, they sacrificed bloody rituals for the sacrifices of mine. This is the whole point with Moloch, and the whole point that they would sacrifice their sons and their daughters, all right, live babies in a fire, and abominable practices. So let's talk about some of these abominable practices. But what this is, so Israel was, and even in the southern kingdom, they were constantly, Manasseh was a king who brought these wicked, evil, abominable practices in. Yahweh was constantly telling to clean up their act. He was always saying, and if you see the word blood, is that they would loved their blood. There's verses in here. This is really what he's talking about. I didn't read it because it's a little arcane. I don't want people to get. I have passed by thee, and sat thou trodden down in thy bloods. And I said unto thee, live in thy bloods. And I said unto thee, live in thy bloods. I washed thee with waters, and washed away thy bloods from upon thee. And I anointed thee with oil. The point is, these energetic soul lives that this is what it means to be full of demons. This is one of the where the whole admonition of not eating with Gentiles with the meat that they sacrificed. You're in a realm of spiritual compromise and spiritual demons. Okay, food, you gotta say things are alive already. I guess we don't really understand, appreciate anymore the level of spiritual realities that are behind so much of what's in the physical. But let me go to this there about the practices of the pagans, and this is really well, let me start here. Let's just still stick with this concept here, which is what I'm trying to say is you just can't, just because you don't understand ritual and sacrifice, you can't just throw it out. All right. It is deeply interesting to know that the New Testament view of sacrifices is entirely in accordance with the ancient synagogue. At the threshold, we meet this principle. There is no atonement except by blood. Now, these are our, the sages are talking now. Rashi, who is a very famous Bible commentary of the Middle Ages, says, the soul of every creature is given it to atone for the soul of man. One soul should come and atone for the other. This was instituted by Yahweh. So don't argue with me. Similarly, Eben Ezra writes, one soul is a substitute for the other. This gets into the whole concept of why Yeshua is coming down the pipe as the final sacrifice for sins once and for all. All right. One soul is a substitute for the other. Moses ben Nachman, I gave the soul for you on the altar, that the soul of the animal should be an atonement for the soul of the man. These quotations can be multiplied indefinitely because this is all over Torah. This is all over the commentary. And this is all over, it's all over the Talmud and the rabbinical understanding. Israel's never changed its position on this. All right. The offer, as it were, puts away his sins from himself and transfers them upon the living animal. This has to do with a lot with the priests, where they were waving their hands, where they would put their hand on the bull's head, where they would do a lot of different rituals. It's all very symbolic and meaningful. This gets into the whole concept of the Day of Atonement and Azazel, and you have two goats. And upon one goat, you put all the sins of Israel, and you send it off. And what Yahweh is always upset with, let me stop and say again, it's not, and he says, oh, I would away with your burnt offerings and your rituals. Because if you're not doing these things, seriously, if you are not practicing Yahweh's code of offerings and sacrifice for atonement for sin with the deep spiritual understanding, it is ritual, and it really is very base and profane and evil. See? This is why he always says, I would that you had faith. I would that you understood and believed. He said, I would rather you have, discernment, wisdom, and understanding than all these sacrifices. Because at that point, a lot of times in Israel, it would just become ritual, and they were totally devoid of understanding. All right. And they would allow even more, that would allow the encroachment of the pagan practices into the temple, because they were losing the scribes. The prophets and the seers were losing the deep understanding of what is going on here. And so that's why he would say a lot of times, do away with your offerings. They're meaningless. They're not working because you guys aren't getting it. You don't understand. I have set something up that is it's a law. It's a statute. All right. There is an atonement. The animal is atoning for you. All right. Now let me keep going. All right. He transfers the sins upon the living, and that as often as anyone sins with his soul, whether from hate or malice, he puts away his sin from himself. This is the understanding in the Old Testament. This is why they would do that. And they would different kind of offerings. They had burnt offerings, trespass offerings, sin offerings, peace offerings, grain offerings. All right. They're very specific. And places it upon the head of his sacrifice, and it is an atonement for him. Hence also the principle laid down by Abraham, that after the prayer of confession, connected with the imposition of hands, the sins of the children of Israel lay on the sacrifice, as in the Day of Atonement. This, according to Maimonides, explains why everyone who has had anything to do with the sacrifice of the red heifer or the goat on the Day of Atonement or similar offerings was rendered unclean. since these animals were regarded as actually sin-bearing. And you can hear it. Fast forward to Yeshua. And he's saying, Father, why have you forsaken me? He literally had to take all the sins of the world on it. He was actually unclean for a moment before the Father. I mean, it's so deep and it's so profound. And if you just throw it all out. All right. In fact, according to rabbinical expression, the sin-bearing animal is on that ground expressly designated as something to be rejected and abominable. The Christian reader will here be reminded of the scriptural statement, for he has made him, Yeshua, who knew no sin, to be sin, that we might be made the righteousness of Elohim in him. People, there's deep stuff going on. All right. And it's a system. We didn't make it up. And so we don't have a right to just dish it. Now, Rabbi Moshe Cordovera, another famous known as the Ramak, writes that animal souls are not immortal and their souls cease to exist when the animal dies. The Midrash unequivocally states that animals don't have a portion in the world to come. Now, there is a whole, another side of this debate, so to speak, that because the word nephesh is used in Genesis 1, nephesh refers to the living animated soul of an animal, and we have that nephesh too. It's what separates the animal kingdom from the vegetable kingdom. Vegetables don't move around, they're kind of stationary. It is the nephesh that is the first level in the animal soul that allows it to have animation, to move around, to be a living, moving, breathing being, and that on 4 legs and walk around, or 2 legs and walk around. Okay, so we have nephesh, animals have nephesh, but we have way more than the animals, see? All right, and this is what you can't rewrite the text, all right? Animals do not have breath, and they do not have spirit, as it is given unto the Ha'adam, okay? So another quote here, it says that the free will means the ability to make moral decisions. See, we are distinct from, and it's a blessing in a sense. See, I hope I have this quote here where it talks about the animals, that actually it's a high honor that they will be rewarded. Oh gosh, I hope I don't know where it went. Oh, I hope I didn't put it away because I didn't want to read it. They will be rewarded for being used by Yahweh in this manner. But let me read this. Free will mean the ability to make moral decisions. Man's free will is that he has the ability to refrain from doing what he wants. This is what separates us from the animal kingdom. To refrain from what his nature wants to do. The animal is for the most part compelled by its nature. It's strictly on instinct. Man has the ability to rise above his base nature and act morally against the wishes of his lower animal self. This is free will. An animal is basically a machine. While for a man it is impossible to predict what he will do, he himself does not know what he will choose. Therefore, man is a rational creature while animals are irrational. See, and this is the thing, but this is why the Torah is so wonderful and so beautiful. Just because an animal has a lower nature than a human does not mean that in any way, in any shape, or in any form, you are allowed to mistreat it, to be cruel, to use it as a base or profane thing, to do any harm to it, except under the prescribed ways of Yahweh. See, this is why, again, be a vegetarian, because today the food industry, they're just raising animals for slaughter. That is not the way Yahweh instituted, in the agrarian way that Israel, the tribes fed themselves. They didn't have slaughterhouses. This is the whole point of the farm. There's a word for it. Now, I don't want to say nuclear family, but almost like a nuclear farm. People had their own ability to raise their own food, to be in control. And you treated your animals with great respect and honor. And it used to be, it was a great honor to be turkey dinner, okay? Because people understood the sacrifice, all right? And they understood the position of the animals and appreciated it. See, I don't know why we have to and the thing that's so dangerous, besides rewriting Torah, having no respect for Torah, thinking God doesn't he's not really a moral being, oh my gosh, because he would prescribe this, is the fact that it's setting us up for an even bigger fallout, which I will come to. So let me go into the flip side here a little bit. So what is, oh, and all right, I'm going to give a couple more quotes before I do the fallout, just to finish making my point, because it's all over the text. It's very clear in Genesis 9:3 that basar, all right, is a word for flesh. Like I said, look in the King James, all the words have to just do with eating. If you're going to talk about it, it's the word basar. It's an animal tissue muscle, drained of its blood, properly prepared, soaking, and all these different things, or it is prepared sacrificially. And I'll tell you, the Jews had been given an unbelievably way to slaughter that was quick and painless, and basically the most humane way to do it. Flip side is everything that's going on in a pagan or a Luciferian way is the total opposite, that draws out through great intense pain and infliction. But it's in the Damascus document. It's all over, where they are. Let's just read here that Jacob, this is on page 54 of this, but the sons of Jacob went astray by them and were punished for their errors. In Egypt, their descendants lived by their willful heart, too obstinate to consult the commandments of Yahweh and do it right, each one doing what was right in his own eyes, which is a total Luciferian doctrine. Do as thou wilt. All right? They even ate blood, and the men were exterminated in the wilderness. See, this is the point. It doesn't say they ate meat. You have no right to substitute a theology in that word. They were consuming blood like the pagans. All right? Let's give it another one here in, let's see, I had all these written down. All right, in page 73, in the same, Damascus is a sectarian work of the Essenes. That's pretty much what scholars believe. Now, here, all right, laws relating to contact with Gentiles. And this is why were the Israelites, and the Essenes especially, the Qumran, goyophobic. This is a new word I was thinking of coining because, you're phobic. Goyophobic, right? Why were they so goyophobic, all right? Let no one attack any of the Gentiles with intent to kill for the sake of wealth and spoil, nor may anyone carry off any of their wealth, so that they may not blaspheme except by the council. So again, Noahide laws, you are not allowed to just dish each other and kill each other for wealth or for spoil, all right? No one may sell a clean animal or bird to the Gentiles lest they sacrifice them to idols. They were trying to protect their own animals. They knew what was going to happen. To sell a clean animal or a bird to a Gentile was anathema, because they knew what was going to happen. All right. Another one, it says down here, laws relating to impure foods. Okay, so you are to defile yourself by eating with any creature or creeping thing, by eating them, from the larvae of bees to any living creature that crawls in the water. And the fish may not be eaten unless they are split open while living and their blood poured out. Over and over. It's all about just eating dry muscle tissue, which has been all the blood, just like eating the pulp of an apple, which they call the flesh. Many times the same word is used for the flesh of fruits and nuts and things, because it is that pulpy substance. All right. So let me, on the flip side, in the pagan practices, it was held that the vital emanation, okay, that's the soul light, they were specifically looking to get the mixtures out of these. It's even deeper. I'm not even going to go into, because it's really, someday I'll have to just do a whole Luciferian YouTube. Oh my gosh. It was held that the soul life from the blood of the sacrificed animals was invigorating to spiritual beings. Now, this is a little bit of what's going on and how we just need to really get ourselves up to speed. But Plutarch is severe about it. He affirms that Plutarch was a philosopher. He affirms that the murderous and lascivious customs at the festivals, and we're talking about pagan festivals, he affirms that the murderous and lascivious customs at the festivals only serve to avert and appease the malice of certain evil spirits, the the demons specifically, or to satisfy the violent and raging lusts of some that either could not or would not enjoy with their bodies or by their own bodies. Such he declared, all right, so that he is acknowledging here that there is such a level of violent, raging lusts going on, and a murderous and lascivious customs that is going on in pagan practices that is whole centered around these vital emanations or this soul life from the blood of the sacrificed animals. All right. Then it says, but the philosophers generally disapprove of the doleful rites and immodest speech. Plutarch emanates the various practices such as the eating of raw flesh. When you ever everything is burnt, it's cooked. I mean, it's burnt up, all the blood, and this is the whole point. Contrasting eating raw flesh with the blood, which is basically what you're drinking and ingesting it. The days of fasting and mourning for the slain divinity, as if that's going to do anything, and the uttering of filthy and unseemly language. He explains that they were not in honor of the gods, but rather to avert, mollify, and appease the wrath of evil demons. See, one of the things, this is why in the pagan practices, it all centered around the things that were forbidden. The eating of blood, drinking of blood, the fornication, that is the sexual licentiousness, the unseeming language, all right, the lascivious and murderous customs, this whole idea of totally becoming with drum beats, and also to become just totally out of control, so that you end up basically opening yourself up. This is all part and parcel, and it isn't just the worst violation is the eating of the meat with the blood in it and drinking the blood. I mean, there's human sacrifice involved. There's cannibalism. All right. These are blood drinkers. Look at the Mayans, where they have excavated whole altars, ancient altars, and found skulls of babies, and I think the Mayans, they found 60,000 baby skulls under this one altar. I should have. But I mean, this is something that we just really have to understand. In contrast, you did have a system of atonement that Yahweh set up through a holy temple in a holy of holies by a high priest who was making atonement for the nations through festivals and offerings. Big contrast, big contrast. The other thing I want to say, this is a footnote from the Didache, and I read this before, but one of the things, see, this is what is really irritating me about this whole, because see, just when we are getting to the point of really exposing this whole practice again for what it is, the whole argument is being diverted to something else. Oh, these poor animals. Well, okay, yes, the poor animals, if you're doing cruelty, you'll be judged. It's already in the Torah. It's all taken care of. But according from the Didache, the corruptors, there's a word they use called the corruptors of young men. All right. See, these are all the practices. According to Associated Text, corruptors are sexual perverts, seducers, especially child rapists. Now, here you have everything that's coming out today. All right. We have this whole problem of pedophile in the highest echelons of our government. All right. We have sex slave is at an all-time high. All right. We have human sacrifice. We know this in these Luciferian practices. We have cannibalism being practiced. We have spirit cooking on the horizon. It's being unpacked today. We have blood drinkers on the horizon today, and we have corrupters of children. All right. What more do you want? All right. This is what we're supposed to be up in arms about. This is what we're supposed to be, if you're going to make a placard about. Okay. March on Washington, drain the friggin' swamp. Okay. This is what is really at stake. So let me just look at my notes here. Because we are no longer under the curse, because Yeshua is an atonement, not only for Israel, but for anyone who wants to come out from the kingdom of Hasatan. Through his blood sacrifice, through his atonement, can receive this remission of sin. He was the life for everyone now that was laid on the altar. I mean, if you can't see this imagery, and if you can't see this fulfillment and this whole prophetic picture coming into fruition, I don't know what to say. So I guess on that note, I'm just really going to end it because, you know, a lot of these things I just want to say it is in the last point I want to make in these Luciferian practices, it is the Misa. They're so demonically charged in the sense that they're literally feeding the energies of these demonic entities. All right. This is something that needs to stop because this releases negative energy, negative power. This releases power into Hasatan's kingdom. It's like currents, you know, so he can pick up on it. He can ride these airways, these releases. All right. This is where spiritual warfare comes into play. This is where we need to get above this thing and on top of this thing, and we need to shut this thing down from our higher authority that we have in Yeshua, we have over fallen entities. All right. So this is my thing to the scissor gang. I just say, let's stick with the word in humility because there is the exoteric knowledge. This is my philosophy. You've heard it from me a million times. Esoteric knowledge, exoteric knowledge. The exoteric sacrifices and offerings are there for a very good reason. Yahweh is in control, and everything and everyone and every nephesh will receive its just reward. Okay? But at the same time, we have to be on our guard because the enemy is a very crafty beguiler who loves to take the heat off of himself and to totally, you know, put it on to some other fallacious argument. So on that note, I'm going to say, Yahweh bless you. Yeshua, if you don't know him seriously as your atonement, he is our peace offering. It's done. And it's a beautiful thing. Study out the scriptures and find the great eternal redemption that is there, and join the kingdom of Elohim, because it's going to get really interesting really fast, in my opinion. So on that note, be blessed and shalom.